Access to justice is not only having access to courts, is not only having access to legal information, but
Right.
is having all the different interactions that you have with the legal system to be accessible, not only from if you have a medical disability, but also from a user perspective, making it simple, making it understandable. So when we started, let's say, contextualizing what is access to justice, and for us, what is our intent is we're going to try to tackle, as broad as this concept is, the broad issues that come along with it. So that means we are helping to create educational content on how technology can help you with streamline your legal practice, or how can you become more efficient in order to avoid having high billable hour rates. That it's a thing that I come from a big law practice. I retired now from that world almost, I want to say 6 years ago.
You're
So
recovering sleep.
yeah, I'm recovering sleep. I'm recovering time with my wife. She's, let's say, she's thankful for that. But let's say that is one of the things: educational content, and educational content around legal rights, legal remedies. What is information that you have access to? So with that legal educational, let's say, focus that comes with access to justice, then we focus on another set of solutions, that is access to legal information. And
Okay.
for that is not only accessing legal databases for research, because again, if you have not been officially or trained in a law school, it is very overwhelming to go to a legal database,
Yes.
LexisNexis, or you name it, to truly understand what is the case law that is applicable. Again, it's very, very, even for
I
someone
have
that's an
trouble
attorney,
doing it. If it's
it is.
not my area of expertise, I have trouble with it in a whole different area. If I were to go into like, I do mostly international work, but if I were to go into like a divorce database, I would not know where to look for where to go.
Yeah, so let's say the reality of things are, the legal industry is very complex in itself, and I think that has created two negative things in my perspective. Again, as an attorney, as a practitioner, I used to again, Kelby, I don't think we ever talked about this, but I used to work in arbitration as well, let's say,
Right.
back in the day. And in fact, international arbitration was what pushed me to enter the technology space, because I used to practice in technology cases. But two things have arisen, I would say, from that. One is we add additional prohibitive cost of entry for the normal user of the legal system to understand, to truly understand, and they feel that in order to make their rights, let's say, valid, or to exercise them, they always need an attorney. Because again, right now, legal information is very, very confusing. It is not understandable in a plain language approach. And again, I do understand, I give value to attorneys. I'm an attorney myself, but I think there has to be an understanding that your legal system is not created, should not be created only for attorneys. Like your legal system, like for instance, a financial system, and that's why you see the trends on why legal technology is not as mainstream as financial technology, because there's still this cloud, this gray cloud that, oh, but only attorneys truly need legal technology. A normal, let's say, citizen, why do I need legal technology, or how do I use it? The legal world is for attorneys. So I think that has created a negative impact, because how we frame statutes, how we frame case law, how we present it to the public. And the second thing that comes to that with a negative reputation, going back to legal education and legal and access to legal information, is we have created, and not only in the US, I want to say, for instance, in the home country where I come from, is the same, that we have created a system developed by attorneys for attorneys without the end users in mind. So we basically create this monopoly of legal assistance, in a sense. And for many that struggle with, let's say, on a day-to-day basis with bills, paying, let's say, your usual cost of living, even $200, $300 per hour of an attorney, and that's the lower end, it is still not affordable to many. And
Right.
we're only thinking on the higher end, like only people with this amount of income can access an attorney. I think that's the wrong mindset. We have lost track of that. But going back to, again, just to do a quick recap of legal education, legal access, and for instance, initiatives that we have created on that are not only uh, user-facing apps that allow you to solve your legal need. For instance, you need to send a letter to your landlord for remediating issues with your apartment. You can just automatically navigate through a questionnaire, and it's gonna spit out the demand letter for your landlord to make those changes. Again, something that in principle you would say, I don't have any remedies, but if you're able to present that in a coherent, easy way, you can exercise your rights as a tenant, for instance. Or another example of this is our legal kiosks. Legal kiosks are basically public-facing computers in which we develop, working with legal aid programs in different cities, ways of accessing legal information. You can access your court hearings via this set of legal kiosks that are across public libraries, community centers, you name it. And let's say that is the type of initiatives. And the third and final one, because I don't want to get too boring with the description of the company, the third and final one, besides access to legal education, access to legal information, the third and most important one is we cannot promote access to justice, or we cannot even fathom access to justice in the digital world when there's still a digital divide. And when I say digital divide, we all think, again, sitting from the comfort of our room, living room, office. Oh, I have a smartphone, I have a computer.
Right.
Probably most of the world operates, but people would be truly shocked when they see that even in the US, there's a substantial digital divide. Not everyone has an access to a smartphone. Not everyone has access to a computer. And again, I'm talking for a first world country or a developed country such as the US, there's still a substantial digital divide. I come from Guatemala, that is a very underdeveloped country. And if I go, let's say, probably 15, 20 miles outside of the city, of the main downtown, you're gonna still find people that don't have a smartphone, that don't have even come across a computer. So we take for granted, I would say, that there's still a large digital divide. And it's not only access to the hardware, again, going back to the legal kiosk, but sometimes it's even access to internet connection. We have been in some rural areas in the US installing legal kiosks in which we have asked, hey, what is so problematic to get internet access? And it's like, look, because providers don't want to, let's say, go this far to serve 2 or 3 houses or 2 or 3 barnyards. Like, they don't want to come all the way down here. So there is still a substantial divide. So from, let's say, A to J's perspective is, we're not only tackling the legal education, the access to legal information, but also helping in some aspects to the access of technology tools, and potentially down the road breaching that digital divide that still exists in the US. Again, we do other types of projects. We help courts with automating processes. We help a lot of legal aid programs, legal services organizations that want to make, let's say, streamline intakes to enable to receive more clients, to serve more clients. So those are the type of projects. But again, considering that broad spectrum of what is access to justice, and again, justice is not only a concept that should belong to attorneys or to, let's say, court magistrates or to judges, but it should belong, again, to the people. And I think democratizing that concept of justice is something that we have long forgotten. And I think as an attorney myself, I look at more from a critical perspective. If we are not developing a system for the people, eventually is either going to crash or it's just not going to be sustainable in the long term. So I think we start noting some of the cracks on the foundation. So legal system right now has a lot of barriers of entry for other people to understand their rights, how they can exercise them, what are the remedies that they have available to them, Kelby.
Yeah, no, and I really agree with what you say, because I one of the reasons I got on TikTok is because I started feeling like there were many attorneys, clients, people who don't really understand the legal sector as much as they should, and that's unfortunately not a good thing. If you think about like how educated some attorneys may be, even attorneys don't seek out other attorneys. For example, somebody who might be an attorney in litigation might not have on hand someone who they worked with for family law or their insurance documents, or I remember a partner at a firm was looking for somebody to help him with a will, and he was almost retired by the point he was doing his first will. We're not always knowledgeable in every sector of the law, and even attorneys, and I think that is sort of the challenge. So I guess the question would be, if you're teaching and if you're providing this information, how do you do that? Do you like partner with either universities or people who are volunteers? Like, how do you collect this information to actually educate people?
Yeah, we do. I would say a large part of how we have growing as a company is coming with partnerships and collaborations, and not only collaborations and partnership with universities. For instance, we have had a collaboration with Cornell University, with some other programs that do have pro bono programs and externship programs in order to develop, let's say, campaigns to, let's say, expose more about rights or certain type of projects that we're developing. That is number one. The second thing is we also create partnerships and collaborations with legal aid programs and community centers, in which in the U.S. there's the biggest funder of legal services organizations is called the Legal Services Corporation. That is a federally funded organization that then distributes funds to legal service organizations across the U.S. So many of those programs, let's say, partner with us with different grants in order to, let's say, create campaigns or create different types of initiatives in order to show, let's say, different individuals and citizens on different cities what are the rights that they have or how to exercise them. There's an interesting initiative, for instance, that we have in Minnesota. I live in Minnesota currently, and it's called the Justice Bus. That it was basically a statewide initiative.
Yeah,
That is basically
and
a
it's an
bus.
actual bus.
And it's an actual bus that goes from town to town. Let's say parking, like it would be any other food truck, for instance. If you have a food truck in mind, a similar approach is they go from town to town, making stops, opening the van and asking people to have legal questions. And the Justice Bus is, I would say, one of those creative solutions that doesn't require technology. It goes back to the simple concepts of how to be innovative and bring, let's say, education to people. And I think we have lost sight of that. We, again, going back to the digital divide concept that we sometimes are blind to. We just think, oh, they can read it on online, they can read it on a computer, but sometimes people don't even know how to search sometimes on Google. Let's not even mention how to search on a legal database, because it's not only typing what are my legal rights for eviction, because you're going to have tens of or thousands of results. It's a matter of how can I be precise, because again, time is valuable, especially when you are involved in a legal issue. You don't have that much time to spend, and you probably are very anxious, you're stressed, and you want to have a precise response. I would say those are the type of projects that we partner with legal service organizations to create those type of marketing campaigns. And the third and final one, I would say, comes with a very organic and very authentic social media strategy. In a sense, we don't necessarily want to force the issue of Google ads or paid ads on the social media, even though we could. It's something that we sometimes say, look, things are gonna come, and I think so far it has shown to be real, that if we are authentic to our mission of access to justice, people start coming to us with new initiatives, new projects.
Right.
For instance, I just met with a client today that say, hey, I want to create an app to make immigration simpler for people that have issues with H-1B visas and green cards, in order to apply for them easily without all of the paperwork. And I have been through those processes myself, and I know how burdensome they can be. So those type of collaborations, I would say, for us, we embrace that type of no strings attached collaboration. Sometimes it's, hey, we hope to help you out with a project. We hope to get the word out. And because of that, I would say we have created a good relationship with many programs across the US, that they see that there's value on this. And again, there's a line. There's always good intention. I always say the world is filled with good intentions, but if you're able to truly execute on those good intentions and at the same time have a sustainable business model, I would say that's a good match. And I think we have found the correct match. Obviously, there are always ways to improve. We are not perfect by any means, but I think being on this niche area, especially on the legal side, collaboration, and again, that no strings attached collaboration is very important. If we would always subject our collaboration on, oh, but we charge X amount for, let's say, helping you out up front, we wouldn't be successful. Sometimes it's, again, we have an initial discovery call, see if we're in this, let's say, we could potentially help, if we are a good potential fit for that project or that campaign. So we have even worked on some pro bono projects. For instance, there was a big project that we developed during COVID. It's not up right now. The website's still up, but the initiative has ended. That was called COVID-19 eviction forms. And if, let's say, for those that are not aware with this, during COVID, during the, let's say, higher stages of COVID, there was a eviction prevention letter that you could send your landlord to avoid being evicted. Again, considering the different issues that were happening, and that was a federal protection. So immediately, I remember this was probably September, probably final week of August 2020, probably early September 2020, in which this eviction protection got announced. And I remember still to this day, in less than 48 hours, we already had let's say, a functional website with the automation of the eviction letter and explaining what were the rights under that eviction protection, in order to exercise the right. So those are the type of initiatives that we want to have, or we want to do even more. But those are the type of let's say, engagements that we have in order to, let's say, engage with stakeholders, with the community, with users of the actual legal system, in order to learn more about the rights or the projects that could be in front of them to exercise the right to learn more about the legal system in general.
So when you talk about the lack of technology, it reminds me anytime I've traveled to Latin America, and my parents are from Peru, so my experience traveling in Peru, I would go through the fair and the markets, and there would be a lot of out-of-work attorneys. And these attorneys would have a briefcase full of different folders, and they would approach somebody, and any kind of issue or something, maybe an eviction, or they needed to draft something, they would have forms for each sort of situation. And this was how attorneys would look for clients and try to help out other people. So it would basically be like, right next door would be a shoe shine, a stop, but the attorney was sitting here with a briefcase full of forms, and somebody needed, hey, I need you to draft an agreement, or I need you to draft this thing. They come out with their briefcase and they just do it here on paper. And it's possible to do it this way. So I think we lose track of that. Not everybody does have, in fact, a computer on hand, a studio, a smartphone. They don't have a lot of this on hand. And the other day, I was trying to find information on something, and I realized a lot of the information is now moving towards apps. And sometimes it's not always on the website. You'll go to the website and say you have to download the app to get like a certain information, and that can be then a lot pretty frustrating to people who don't always have a smartphone. I'm sure there's always the issue also, like, oh, I don't have the Apple. It only works on the Apple versus the Android. And so it seems like we're getting further and further disconnected, while there's a lot of people that still don't have this technology. And I think services like yours are crucial. I remember when I moved out in the middle of nowhere in Virginia, and there was no internet. There was no internet. There was no cable. I called the company and I said, "Well, how do I get internet?" It's like, we need enough people to sign up for us to make it worth digging a cable and getting out there. In the meantime, the only alternative was to get internet via satellite, which is not cheap. So it makes it very difficult for any kind of information there. So what you're saying is that you could probably bring this in. I mean, in those situations, how do you get information to those remote locations?
Yeah, for instance, it goes back to, let's not lose sight of we're still humans, and it's sometimes doing, let's say, campaigns that requires putting up flyers in community centers,
Yeah.
going back and handing out, let's say, handouts on there's going to be a session on your legal rights this day on the, let's say, community gym. Let's say, I think there
More
has
like
been,
town hall format, like
yeah, like,
old school.
yeah,
Okay.
like there has been this, and I do agree with the premise that we have become disconnected. Again, I'm a millennial. I don't even want to think how it's going to be to interact and socialize as a Gen Z nowadays. But you start noticing the different generations and how social interaction has been evolving and changing due to technology. Again, I always frame it like this, and it's technology is a very good tool, but again, as a tool, it can have its benefits and it can have its downfalls. And I think if we rely too much on technology in order to create artificial social interactions, we start losing sight of our humanity in a sense. And that's, I would say, one of my biggest fears, again, working in technologies. Every single time I feel that we're losing more of our humanity and that, let's say, empathetic approach to, let's say, our fellow human being. And I think in access to justice, we got to think, hey, technology is one component. Technology is a tool. Again, it's something that could leverage us on certain circumstances. But there are other things that we need to go out and explain to people. I remember I was in Texas recently installing legal kiosks by myself, and I was nearing certain cities in Texas near the border. And people approach me. Again, I know Spanish and English. People spoke to me in Spanish, I think because they felt more comfortable. And they asked, hey, what are you doing? What are you building? And I took 10, 15 minutes away from that approach to explain them. And they seem excited. And again, that engagement, that interaction is probably something that they're not going to find online. And having that one-to-one, again, obviously there we have limited time and limited capability to go with every single individual that lives in a specific city. But in those areas, it's just being creative. And sometimes it's even taking a few other members of our team and saying, hey, you cover this region, I cover this region, and we, let's say, put up flyers, we go on certain type of houses that have more volume of individuals, and we tell them that there's going to be this initiative. Again, that's why we partner up with legal aid programs, because they also have other mechanisms that have served in the past. So there are a bunch of initiatives if, again, we still go, I don't want to say go back to our creative nature as humans,
Right.
but we just go back to the foundations of what it means to be human. And I think this question, I don't want to get philosophical and all, but it's going to start having more let's say importance as we get into AI, potential, let's say, artificial humans, artificial intelligence. How, let's say, are we entering a stage in which we have to embrace and truly reaffirm the humanity that, again, is that quality and component that differs us from animals, from machines, from aliens, now that is on social media because of the recent congressional hearings. So I would say that is something that I see technology is taking away from us, but we should be on the front side of saying we are not losing our humanity. Whatever the technological advances is, we have to stick true to that. And I would say that's the only way, you can try and solve, because again, we're just one piece of the puzzle to try and help, because I don't think we by ourselves, we can solve access to justice. I don't think it's going to happen. Even if we were one of the most successful companies in the world, we still cannot solve this issue by ourselves. We would need thousands, if not millions, of initiatives like this. But I would say we are trying to complement the technology with a human nature in order to try and tackle those issues, Kelby.
So in those areas, it sounds like it's amazing work, and it's amazing initiative. And I just wonder, with Legal Aid and Cornell and these partnerships, are there other ways that you either get funding, or do you accept sponsorship opportunities? I'm sure everybody would love to help here and there, but at the same time, you want to stay true to your mission. So like, how do you get to fund all of this?
Yeah, I would say we usually try to operate in a very lean model as a business. And I worked in arbitration before, then I migrated into helping startups into capital fundraising and venture capitals. That was my I pivoted into that area, and then I pivoted entirely into technology after understanding, let's say, the ins and outs. And one of the principles that I always learn from helping and advising startups is you need to operate in a very lean manner. That means you have to create a very sustainable business model that, again, you are not only throwing money away or cash or burning cash, your cash flow, just because it sounds, let's say, interesting, but there's not going to be a tangible outcome after that. So I always preach to our team is we need tangible outcomes of things. It's not only spending and throwing time at something. For instance, in Shopify, I don't know if you noticed recently, but they now add how much an internal meeting costs on every Google invite that they send out. It's like,
Really?
this internal meeting is costing us $2,000, and there was a big set of articles talking about that, and I think goes back to the notion that I think in law firms is quite differently, the notion about being lean and trying to operate with a core team. So we try to create this business model in which, again, we have projects, we have grants that get awarded to legal aid programs that they partner with us, and then we finance, let's say, some of our projects, some of our initiatives. But going back to the basics and the principles of operating a lean business model, and that's why you saw on technology companies last year that there were a lot of firings, is because many technology companies noticed we have to operate lean in a very turbulent market. In the turbulent economics, with inflation being high, we have to operate in a very lean manner. Let's say, no one obviously wants to lose their job, but sometimes companies have to make those tough decisions, and it's not necessarily because of a personal issue. It's not necessarily because you're bad at it. It's just we need to save the limited resources that we have. And let's say, we have not necessarily gone through that route, but we try to be very strict on what are we investing our time, what are the initiatives that are going to have tangible outcomes after that. So, for instance, one thing that we have so far not accepted are external investors. Why is that? Or investors that want shares in the company, is because I state very true that once you have investors, your core mission starts to change. And again, that is a sacrifice in a sense that we're willing to take.
Right.
It's look, we want to stay true to ourselves. And sometimes with investors comes say that what's the bottom line? Let's say, how much revenue are you generating? How much profit are you generating? Which, again, there are different stages for companies in order to think that way. But I would say until we're in a better position from business models and other circumstances, we have not taken, I'd say, external investors. But again, it's self-funded. Everything is self-funded with grants or our own apps, our own software as a service solutions that we give to clients. For instance, we have name change solutions that are Colorado name change or Wyoming name change, in which someone can just quickly go through an app on the web, and they get all the forms that they need to change their name, change the license documents, and all the complementary legal documents that you wouldn't even know how to start. So those are the type of things that create revenue for us. And again, we try to create different streams of income. So, for instance, we have Udemy courses that creates a legal stream of income. Then we also have software as a service offerings that creates another stream. We have grants that get funded for us in order to create more initiatives. That's another stream of revenue. So we try to create multiple avenues of revenue in order to be sustainable as possible. But again, even if we would be have millions of resources to spend, I think it always goes back to how lean can you operate. And now with technology, operating efficiently and very lean is a thing of that you can leverage. Before, you needed, let's say, a lot of human capital in order to do things. Now, with many of the technology tools that we have, AI, you name it, you can operate very efficiently with a core group that you feel strongly that they are aligned with your vision, your end goal as a company. And I think that's what we strive for, and that's how we operate in our business model, Kelby.
Well, if I don't know if you do, but if you accepted law school volunteers or people maybe interested in getting into the legal field, I see this, especially if I was in college about to apply to law school, I would love to take a summer and maybe help out and see what it's really like, because this is where you're getting your hands dirty and really helping out the people who really need it, who can't afford this kind of stuff, not only just because of the lack of access to technology, but the lack of information and resources. And you were talking about also AI at one point. I can see how this can be a little bit complex when you're starting to move state to state and from different fields for everything from family to maybe a criminal case. The laws are changing. It's really hard these days
Mm-hmm.
to go through a database and try to find where you have. But if the AI or maybe a Google type of search feature can allow somebody to just naturally ask a question, you might get a better result. And it looks like the technology is getting better in that respect. But the thing that, and usually I will talk about with AI is the dangers of AI is that a lot of the information that's out there is based on the people who got or who were successful, who put their information out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'd say 30%, maybe more of America doesn't have their hands into the legal system. So it's probably not recognizing those situations. You know, what happens in I don't know, maybe a land dispute, and maybe there's not enough legal information out there that that we can put in this database. So sometimes AI it may be helpful in one respect, but it may not have enough information to give somebody to call it reliable. I think that's where my point is going. So it sounds like you have challenges
Mm-hmm.
as it develops, as it goes. But I think you're very good on hitting the point on the head. Is like we have to keep it human, because if it's too scary, basically, um, people see it more as a fear. They rather just go to the attorney directly. They probably want to skip the kiosk and everything else and just go to the town hall. They might feel like that's more one-to-one than it would be a computer. Yet, you know, that computer will probably have more information. But, you know, yeah, we have to respect that human element.
Yeah, and again, don't get me wrong in the sense that I don't think, let's say, attorneys should cease to exist, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's why people go to attorneys or people go to doctors is because we need that sympathetic interaction. We need that empathetic, let's say, understanding of what we're going through. So technology by itself cannot provide that. Like you can create the best user experience, but it's not gonna come close to that interaction. So it also goes down relates to another point is that's why I think we do have a lot of collaborations from students that come from our externship programs or pro bono basis because they said, look, I want to understand and down the road how I could potentially not only leverage this but become more of a unbundled legal firm in the sense that I can provide products to my clients so they can access it without me being involved. Now there are certain type of matters that I need to be involved. There are other things that I don't have to be involved because they're pretty simple. But again, giving that option or giving that flexibility to a client is important, which again, in the US is a very challenging market, at least on the legal landscape, because as you accurately mentioned, every single state has different laws, different regulations about any legal topic. So for instance, if it's divorce, that is one area that we have collaborated on a project with Hello Divorce, that is an app that basically automates the divorce process for those couples that basically have an agreement upfront to get a divorce. It helps them to navigate through the divorce process, generate their forms, and they are in different states. They're even accelerating their growth even more. But again, we would like to accelerate even more, but we have a lot of legal issues that are state by state specific. For instance, expungement of criminal records is one example. Divorce is another. Family law issues, you name it. The contract law might even change from a state to state basis. So there's a challenge. I would say there's areas that are prone to disruption and to have higher scalability are those areas for federal issues. So we're talking about immigration, social security benefits. We're talking potentially intellectual property in the US. Those issues that are federal, let's say, in which we have a consistent set of rules across the states that makes it easier. But again, most of those federal issues, not everyone has involvement with them. Again, someone that is a US citizen, likely they're not going to have many issues with immigration topics, and someone that is that is an immigrant, probably at that stage they are not eligible for Social Security benefits. They're most in the, let's say, what I call down to earth legal topics. But yeah, we do accept, again, collaborations with students that are interested. Again, we have hired a few students that have worked with us as externs. They fell in love with the work that we do, and they have been with us probably 2-3 years now. So those are the type of also candidates that we like to have that start from law school, that see the ins and outs, how we operate, and then they practice. They have a summer internship at a big law firm, and they say, oh, you know what, I actually enjoy more the technology side. And again, I would say there's always personalities for different types of worlds. Like, there are personalities to work at a big law firm. For instance, I used to work that. I gave it a shot. I didn't have the mental fortitude to stick with that. But there are other, let's say, members like myself that probably we want to be more relaxed in certain ways, stress on other things. But again, I don't want to say you should not be an attorney. I would say it's a very noble profession. It's still noble to this day. I still do some legal advice from time to time, but it's always understanding yourself. It's always saying, how can I make an impact? And I think millennials, especially, I've read a few books on generational changes, and one thing that they mentioned is the millennial is very, very, and that's why you see different initiatives and different campaigns. The millennial wants to be a part of something, wants to be a part of a movement, or wants to feel part of something. And I think that's what you will need to find. So people, many of the millennials that work with us, because they find a purpose and they find a meaning of helping us in this journey of access to justice.
Now, sort of walk me through, because anyone who might not understand what it is you do, how do you find them? How do you find people that need help? Because they already have trouble getting access. How do you access them? How do you find that? Like, you just do brochures and flyers? Because then that's really hard. It's like it's not like you can put it online. It sort of defeats the purpose. So how do you find it? Is like collaborations with public libraries, and they help you promote, or because I think there's a lot of even content creators that should probably promote something like this, pro bono, however it is, because it is a good cause.
Yeah, let's say how there are two different type of approaches. Let's say from projects and business perspective, how people find us. Usually, I want to say, because of that organic and authentic approach of our marketing strategy, people, let's say, hear about us because we work on this project, or someone mentioned it to them. So it's very organic in a sense. Again, not pushing Google ads or anything like that. Even though we could, we just try to, our works, let's say, be the witness or the testament to the work that we can do. And that's how, let's say, many legal aid programs or universities or courts sometimes, let's say, get in touch with us because they have seen our other projects. So that's from a business, and let's call it business to business collaboration. Now, when it goes to the other side, from a business to client or end users interaction, how we usually engage with them, I would say social media is very important. So for instance, at the beginning, TikTok was not a thing for the company, but then we started saying, hey, TikTok is the new, let's say, model of reaching out newer generations. We have to be on TikTok. Again, I'm not a TikTok guy in the sense that I'm not an influencer. I don't think I have the personality to be an influencer and doing all the time, but we have Bailey, they handle, let's say, that approach on TikTok and engaging with users. And I think, let's say, TikTok is becoming the new way of engaging, say, your audience, again, for those that have access to a mobile phone or a tablet and then have access to internet. But on the other side of the spectrum, for those end users that don't have access to the internet, it goes exactly to what you're mentioning. For instance, sometimes we have gone to public libraries and we just leave a small business card and say, let's say, HJ, we help with legal services projects and providing access to legal services, and we just pin it on the, let's say, the billboard, and people can grab a business card and they can contact us. That has been very, very successful in my experience. For instance, in other engagements with public libraries, we tell them, hey, this is, for instance, in which we install legal kiosks, because we have installed legal kiosks in public libraries and community centers, is we're going to leave a set of business cards attached to it, and people can reach us if they have any questions. Or in fact, in the legal kiosks themselves, we always have a contact form for people to reach us. And I would say the other component to that is that we are now starting interesting projects that we want to go even more to the basics on how can we use radio to, let's say, explain that there are legal initiatives to help them with legal advice, legal resources. I have never experienced, let's say, working on or marketing on radio. I can probably, our generation has, probably we experienced radio, but now you.
That was like 10 years ago for me.
Yeah, let's say, when was the last time that I tuned into a radio? Probably when I was 12 years old, I want to say. It was a long time ago. So now we're starting to, let's say, ask ourselves, is it worth creating campaigns on the radio? Because there's still, again, a large generation that is not millennial, is not Gen Z, but baby boomers generations that come before that still use the radio. They probably tune into NPR, let's say, some other, let's say, networks that might be reaching out. So there are multiple approaches, and that's how a lot of end users have found us. Again, I think we could do an even better job with what we have done so far, but I would say it's not only relying on the digital, it's also relying on the human. And again, going back to the basics, putting up flyers in billboards on public libraries. We are even considering, again, not to litter, but posting things outside public buildings, but that is usually fraud upon, because we usually ask, hey, is it okay if we put this up? And they are pretty strict with what we can put up. So there are instances in which we cannot post anything. But I would say it's a combination of both. Again, as digital becomes more embedded into our lifestyles, obviously that is there's a good communication with end users. But I would say going back to the core areas in which a lot of problems are, it is still a challenge for us that we haven't entirely figured out. We're still iterating, in a sense, prototyping, innovating as much as possible, how we can access even more of that audience. Kelby.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you're hitting it on the key. It's like sometimes the radio will reach people that don't have internet, because of how long and the infrastructure that radio has had, whereas internet or even smartphone access is a lot more recent. So maybe the older generation may not have access to that, or the infrastructure for it. They might live in very remote areas. But I'm curious about the kiosk situation. So if you gotta have to get permission to put up a flyer, what do you have to do to get permission to put a kiosk in a courtroom or a library or wherever it is that you put these in? What is the process of putting? So the kiosk has like a computer, and basically is just something that you can borrow to actually access a website or something like that. If you can sort of walk me through what that is.
Yeah, so the Legal Kiosk Initiative, and we also have even a standalone website to anyone that is interested. That is legalkiosks.com. That it's on the web, and you're gonna see different states and the different programs that we have worked with. So in order to do that, let's say, I would say Legal Kiosk is the best example of multiple levels of collaboration. So the direct collaboration that we have is with a legal aid program or a legal service organization. For instance, in Texas was the Texas Legal Services Center. In Nevada was Nevada Legal Services. So that's the first, let's say, collaboration. We engage with them and we start ideating what is the experience that you want to give your users, what are the resources that we want to provide on the legal kiosk, what are the different components around that experience. Some, for instance, say, I want our users to have the ability to automate documents for expungement of criminal records. Others might say, look, I don't want to have the automation of forms. I want to have access to our statewide legal website with legal information, and we provide them the different navigations in order to access that information. Or someone else could say, on top of that, I also want to have access to for clients to access their remote hearings on Zoom, Microsoft 365, because there's still remote hearings happening. Even though COVID has ended, I think many courts embrace the notion of remote hearings, and that's still ongoing. So that first collaboration, it's, let's say, level number one. Now we take it to a second level of collaboration, and that's when working together with the legal service organization, we identify what are, let's say, good public locations in order to install those kiosks. Because it doesn't make sense, for instance, to have a kiosk in the same location in a half-a-mile radius. It wouldn't make sense unless, let's say, there's a pretty big city or a pretty big jurisdiction. You can have multiple kiosks within a 0.5 radius, but other than that, we try to have kiosks on different cities and different locations, different counties. So with that, it does come with an exercise of mapping potential public locations that could have impact on people access. What is the human traffic? Again, the human traffic, instead of website traffic, instead of analytic traffic, is what are the locations that most people usually walk through? Is it this public courthouse? Is it this Central Avenue? Is it this community center? What are those locations that people usually know that are high volume in human traffic, in a sense, people walking through in and out? And after we have identified, it goes back to, hey, let's send an email asking if they would like to host a legal kiosk. And again, the program or the locations, it could be public libraries, community centers, courthouses, any type of public location, even private locations. We have even had law firms that have volunteered to host legal kiosks. When we engage with them, is we ask, hey, this is the initiative. They don't have to basically put up a cost, because we set up that for them, because again, it's a collaboration with a grant that gets funded through the legal aid organization that we partner at a first level. And then we offer, hey, we're going to install it for free. We're going to set it up. The only thing that we ask is for you to provide printing paper in case it runs out. But other than that, we set up the legal kiosk and they operate. So because of that arrangement, they are usually happy to, let's say, collaborate with us and say, okay, let's set it up. We usually just sign a small collaboration understanding amongst the three of us and say, this is what we A2J Tech are developing, this is what the legal services organization is doing, and you agree to host a legal kiosk. Obviously take reasonable precautions and protections for the legal kiosk, and then try to avoid that people are taking away stuff, or just be mindful and reasonable into the security around the legal kiosk. But other than that, they are very willing. I would say one thing that we have noticed is that most of those public locations are very willing, excited, and sometimes eager to have a legal kiosk because they see the need. And in some instances, many of those locations are for the community. Again, they're not, they don't take the benefit of saying, oh, we had less people come in today. Yes, it is a win. That's not a good thing. Probably the only location that I could think that they would be happy if they don't have a lot of people is probably an emergency room. But other than that, you want to have more people come into your location, see the services or what you are able to offer. Even a public library. A public library wants to have more people come in, see what the services, the premises, get out books, again, engage with the community. So they have, I would say that's the two-tier collaboration that we usually do with public locations. And I would say they have been pretty receptive. Again, there are instances in which a location has asked, hey, we cannot host it anymore because, let's say, we are gonna now use that room for, let's say, hosting another type of experience, or we're gonna have a showing of art, so we cannot host it for the next 6 months or the next few months, so we move it away. Again, the legal kiosks are something that we can easily move from one location to another, but I would say 85-90% of the time, people just want to keep it and keep providing that service to their users.
Yeah, no, that you bring up a good point. Like, by people coming to the legal kiosk to get information, they're actually coming to the area as well. So if maybe a business is worried about, well, we're bringing in traffic, like, no, it's good traffic. Like, people might want to shop or buy, or it's a win-win. I think in the long term, and hopefully you'll get more actual funding, and I can even see it. Like, I wonder if there's a computer company out there, I won't name any names, so a computer company might say, oh, we want to be the exclusive provider of a specific computer that might set up in these kiosks, and it all sort of builds with time, but at the same time, it's all for the intended good of helping human human beings interact, understand legal rights, being able to get out of situations that are not favorable to them. So they need a lot of this information. And one of the things that you had mentioned also was like being able to send a letter to a landlord. If somebody comes to their kiosk, is there like a section for templates that
Mhm.
pops up and here's what you should fill out?
Yeah, and it comes to that notion of what is the experience that you want to provide. We have some programs that want to give, let's say, different categories of legal issues, and within those different categories of legal issues, give template documents or the ability to automate those documents. Again, that's why legal services organizations in some aspects have the freedom to customize the experience based to their knowledge of their users. Again, probably a user in Nevada has different needs and different approaches to a user in Texas. They have different issues, they have different concerns at one stage. Probably eviction in Texas might not be as high in Nevada, so therefore you want to feature eviction issues probably at the top of your list than family law issues, for instance. So we usually do create that. Again, I think right now in Texas, that is one of the projects that we are working on. They want to add the ability to expunge criminal records and also driving records. One of the things that I noticed, again, going back to the human approach and the human interactions, when I was doing installs of legal kiosks in Texas, I heard a bunch of individuals approach me and, hey, and when are we going to have the ability to expunge driving records? Because that is something that truly hurts us. And many of the cities are immigrant communities, so they don't know how to access that. Is it something possible? They know that the notion of expunging your driving records exists, but they don't know how to execute on that. So that, for instance, I remember that I even mentioned to one of the project managers of that project, hey, I've been hearing this in the last few installs, it might be worth bringing up. And I think they're in the works of adding that as a part of the experience in the new enhancements for the user experience on the kiosk. So again, I would say that's the freedom and the flexibility that legal kiosks provide. Again, similar to what you see the kiosk on airports, that some of them are more fancy than others. I would say that's how you can create it. You can make it as fancy as possible. For instance, I don't know if some of you have been in the Atlanta airport as of recently, but they have kiosks that you can just scan your ticket and it shows you the way and the different exits that you have to take in order to get to your gate.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, so I've been traveling through Atlanta in the last few months, and you just scan it and automatically shows you have to do this, take this exit, go down the stairs, and automatically shows you the route in order to get your gate. Again, there are other kiosks that are very simple that you have to manually input, and it's just gonna show you at what time the plane leaves and on which gate. Again, that's why you can customize and create the different experiences depending not only budgetary constraints, let's say how much budget do you have, but also how comprehensive you want to be on your experience.
Are you also to I guess to reach out to people? Are you also involved in events like let's say 4th of July or something? There might be a big fair, or a gathering. Is that something you target, or is that you prefer maybe expos, like maybe the health expo, maybe both? Is that something that you do?
Yeah, so we do events. I would say we have not been great, or potentially that is something that we can be better at public events like creating 4th of July specific events on legal help or going to forums on for Christmas, for instance, on legal advice. I would say we have not done that. We do host our own events. We attend certain type of events, many legal conferences, sometimes not only legal conferences, but social initiative conferences in order to talk either about our initiatives or to have a small presence in the event and to explain, let's say, case studies. But I would say we want to improve even more, because I would say the concept of kiosk is relatively new in a sense. We have been working on legal kiosks for 2 years. I want to say 1.5 years if I want to be conservative, because actually that started. It all started when it got funded it started in Minnesota. Minnesota was the initial legal kiosk project, and it was a CARES Act approval because of after COVID, in which part of the CARES Act money was destined to create legal kiosks. So we started with Minnesota. At the end, I remember it was December 2020 when we got approved. They had to be deployed by 2021. So we started working on that early 2021. And then after that project, let's say, wrapped up, then we start noticing other states coming through the pipe and being interested on the notion of legal kiosk. And then we started streamlining and basically getting a process in place on how to deploy legal kiosks. So I want to say 2 years, but officially more than a year and a half than the most, with a new streamlined approach on developing and deploying legal kiosks.
That's incredible. Yeah, that sounds like so much work. So I applaud your efforts. Even if you think you haven't done enough, it sounds like you've done plenty. How big is your team? Because it sounds like you're all over.
So I would say our team, again, going back to the notion of leanness, we have 15 employees. I would say we started with 3 employees back in 2019.
Okay.
We have, 15. Again, there are a few stages in which we are up to 18, then back to 15, because maybe we have a few consultants that come only as on a contractor basis because they have other positions, and we are very open and receptive to that. But it goes back to sticking true to our operating very lean as a company and having a core team that truly identifies themselves with the mission. Because we have found that if you don't identify yourself with the mission, and it's something that we can truly tell after a few months, because again, you have to do so much different things, especially working at a startup, that if you don't have that passion about the mission of the company, probably after 2 months you say like, look, I can find something that is going to be simpler, and which I have thought about it myself. I don't want to come here as a say on savior that I haven't thought about and saying, oh, there's another position that it's simpler than this. But I'm very passionate about access to justice. I have witnessed firsthand struggles of people with access to justice. Again, I come from a very, very underdeveloped country with tangible needs on not only access to justice, but access to clean water, access to food. Let's say many of us that come from Latin American countries do see the struggle. And I think the US market serves as a platform in order to think how to better, let's say, create those results. So our team is small. We don't necessarily are always thinking on how can we get bigger quicker, but it's how our core team can expand on their skills and then take ownership of different initiatives. Because, for instance, our plan always has been, let's say, Joseph, that is the CEO of the company, he has always preached this, and it's, you should be very integral as a professional. You should have multiple set of skills that even if you don't stay with us in the long term, you can impact that you're in your next venture. So if you decide to become an entrepreneur by yourself, you want to start your own project, you want to start your own legal technology company, you want to start your own startup, like as long as you have used some of those skills that we have provided, for us, that's also important. It's not only important for you to stay with us forever, that would be ideal, but we know life changes, let's say conditions change. So if you have to move on because you found a better position, then you can use some of the skills that we taught you, in which you could potentially impact access to justice. Let's see, we welcome it again. That's why I stated from the beginning, we alone are not going to solve this issue. And similar to how you cannot solve by yourself the financial system. That's why you have a lot of fintech companies, and you also have credit card processors, you have banks, you have a lot of individual stakeholders that have to be involved in order to provide access to financials, the financial system. The same thing with the legal system. We are just one piece of the puzzle. But yeah, I'd say we hope in the future that more of our team members eventually are going to grow out of the company, and they're going to become their own leaders in a way, spearhead their own initiatives. But that's how we frame it. And again, we don't try to categorize our collaborators in oh, you're only let's say a digital marketing expert, and that's the only thing that you can do. We try to give them exposure on other things. Like, let's try to see if you're able to build a website. Maybe you enjoy it, or let's try to see if you are maybe interested on integrations with APIs. Maybe you're interested into that. I was an attorney. I never thought to myself that I was going to be interested in technology. It was until I started doing research and training by myself that I said, oh, maybe it's something that I can do. And again, the company gave me a shot in a sense with Joseph that I can put into practice what I have learned. Now let's see if I'm good at it. I'm not perfect by any means, but I have been improving every single year that I have been with the company. I know, oh, I know now this, I can probably do better. Right. The same mindset I think we try to convey to our collaborators is how can you improve as a professional, as a human being, and potentially down the road you can also help us to do those small changes and impacts.
Well, and it's so rare that a company will give you that opportunity. Usually they do put you in this sort of isolated spot where, you know, you're just a web designer, just a project developer. So it's great, especially as an attorney, to understand more about technology, because it does affect us. And sometimes when there's a lack of the knowledge of technology, you think, oh, I need to have all these bells and whistles, when really you don't. You want it to actually just be efficient, work for you, do what it needs to do, because a lot of times we can get caught up with too much technology and we're missing the point, and missing the information of what we wanted it to do. So this has been a great. I know that we're like starting get short on time. I don't know, Bailey, if there's any questions, but if not, the other thing that I would hope ends up being a thing is that people find the good tools that you have and hopefully collaborate, not just in partnership, but also the way I see it. I don't know if this is the way you see it, but the way I see it is you have people who are coming and needing access to justice, but you're going to also need a web of assistance. For example, somebody's going to need to sign a form. They're going to get your help. They're going to have the form, but at some point they're going to need a notary, or they're going to need to know where to have something, maybe an apostille signed so that they can get a birth certificate or something sent. They're going to need more and more collaborators, and that network is going to need to be a little bit bigger. Hopefully, people who are in the legal industry realize the importance of what you're doing, and either promote your services, knowing that, oh, at some point this is going to come back. You know, it does become a win-win. For example, a notary might say, well, a lot of these people are remote. At some point, if there is a town hall session and all of these individuals need a document signed, need something to be done, when that happens, this notary should travel there and sort of be on call, or be there to help with all of those signatures. So that example would be, that's a great win-win collaboration for people, because there are a lot of change during the pandemic, especially remote. So a lot of things had changed from notarization to now we have remote stenography or court reporting, transcription services. And some people don't realize that that's something that you can even ask for in a court, or things that are more acceptable to do. There are court sessions that are now by Zoom, and maybe somebody realizing, oh, maybe I can go to the library, go to the kiosk, instead of having to go maybe 50 miles to the local court. I can just go to 2 miles to the local library. That can be an option. So it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity for not only collaboration, but it helping more than just the person that it targets. It helps other people as well to spread the word about their services.
Yeah, and also to start wrapping things up in order to be respectful of the audience's time, is probably the legal industry, out of many industries, is probably one of the biggest prone to disruption. The thing is, we have not been creative enough. I still think it's gonna come to time. How can we, let's say, I would say, many legal technology companies that are gonna, let's say, happen in the future are gonna be those that give a comprehensive experience without bifurcating different stages of your legal needs. Without, as you said, someone that you don't need to first sign it, then go out to notarize it, then go out to do the filing. But let's say those type of comprehensive experiences that probably are going to have a technological component, but also a human component. Probably you're looking at many legal technology services, similar to what happened with, let's say, TurboTax. Why TurboTax is, I would say, successful. It's not only because it allows you to do automated forms and filings, but also you have the ability to hire a tax advisor to make sure that your filings are correct or that you can do something to improve it. And I think some of those notions of TurboTax have been replicated from other, let's say, more mainstream legal technology companies, like LegalZoom is probably one of them. Rocket Lawyer is another one that has probably been thrown around. But I would say it's not only about contracts, it's about, let's say, divorce, it's about child custody, it's about expungement of criminal records. And I think that is what we're going to see in the future. So legal industry is very prone to disruption. And I think usually when I mention this, attorneys jump, but again, attorneys are a part of that disruption. They should be a part of that disruption. But they should also be mindful that it is in their best interest to provide more openness and less barriers to people to the legal system, because that is just going to mean more volume of work that you can automate using several tools. So it is a win-win, but I think sometimes it is not thought about it. If we automate certain things or we provide more services, we have the ability to service more clients. So I think there has to be a reframing and a rewiring of how the people think about technology. They immediately think, oh, we're going to get replaced, when I was like, no, you're not going to get replaced. Probably you're going to get replaced in another lifetime. But right now, I don't even see it viable that attorneys would get replaced by AI, as everyone's throwing around. Like AI still, so even ChatGPT still makes stuff up. That probably there have been a bunch of news saying how ChatGPT makes up case law that doesn't even exist. When you go into truly check the facts, that is made up. So again, I think we're still a long ways out, but I think if not only attorneys, but people that want to disrupt, because again, the disruption of the legal technology industry is not only for attorneys, it's for anyone that is creative about tackling issues. I would say there's a lot of potential to truly change the industry for the better.
Yeah, it's fascinating how much technology changes. And 20 years ago we would have said, oh, the fax machine would have prevented us from having to sign things in person, and yet we're still doing it. So technology doesn't replace us, and I think you're right. If anything, I think it's going to change the industry, but also make it give us additional work in many aspects, because human element will be needed more often than none. So it's great to talk to you. I wish I could be right there to have a more better conversation, but at the same time, I know we're running out of time. So no, I very much appreciate it. So the websites that I heard for access to the justice were the legalkiosk.com, but they can find also A2J.
A2J is at Go A2J, so GO A2JTech.com. That's our company website. And let's say I would say those two websites have some of our initiatives. We have other independent, let's say, website projects with other products or services. For instance, we have the Wyoming name change websites. That is, let me just, because I have if you would see my GoDaddy domain, you would be shocked of how many domains I have, and some of them I just bought it because of just being crazy with a potential project. But Wyoming name change, everything together.com, for instance, you're gonna have Wyoming name change, and the same with Colorado name change. So those are, for instance, some of the efforts that we also do to productize legal services in a way.
Great. And I see we can find you on LinkedIn and on Twitter, or probably called now X.
Yeah, you can always find me. I do engage more with those two apps more than TikTok, but Bailey is one of our content creators on the back end that does their magic with TikTok and Instagram. So you can also follow us in any social media. We should have a presence: TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and so on and so forth.
Yes, they're wonderful. Well, it's been great talking to you, and hopefully we can do this again. But it's a great opportunity to get an introduction, because you're doing so much, and I can't imagine like a month or two from months from now how much is going to change. So in the time that we've booked this, Twitter has changed its name, and and UFOs are being confirmed. So also many things have changed.
Yeah, no, but I think things are gonna change rapidly even more. Again, go back to Moore's law about computing power. Let's say things are gonna just get crazier and crazier. So hopefully, again, goes back to the initial notion, as long as we don't keep lose our humanity, you say changes could come. But I think that goes back to that component, so that I think it's what this basically is a distinctive factor across anyone, anything. It's always that human element. So